He looked into his mother's blind eyes, her face still radiant with the love she always showed him, and his father's silent but steady presence beside her, and the flood of emotions nearly overwhelmed him. I'm sorry, Femi choked out, his voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I I didn't mean what I said earlier. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was afraid, afraid of what people would think. But it was wrong. I was wrong. In the heart of a beautiful village, nestled between fertile soils and wide rivers, there lived a young man named Femi. His childhood had been one of quiet resilience, marked by his parents' disabilities, but brightened by their love. Femi was known throughout the village for his good nature, kindness, and gentle spirit, a reflection of the home from which he came. His father, Babatunde, had been born into a family of farmers, working the rich red soil like generations before him. Though he was deaf and mute, Babatunde's hands spoke with the earth, and his actions communicated the depth of his heart. His calm, hardworking nature earned him respect in the village. Many marveled at how he navigated the world of silence, as though he could hear and speak through the rhythm of the fields and the whispers of the wind. Femi's mother, Moronike, was equally extraordinary. Blind since birth, she had a radiant inner light that seemed to shine through her sightless eyes. She was known for her beaded craft, exquisite works of art that adorned the neck, wrists, and ankles of many in the village. Her fingers danced along the beads as if guided by an unseen force, creating designs so intricate and beautiful that it was hard to believe they had come from someone who had never seen the world's colors. It was the quiet admiration of Moronike's beauty and character that first drew Babatunde's attention to her. Long before the idea of marriage was mentioned, he would watch her from a distance when he visited the market, captivated by her smile, always kind and serene as she felt her way through the world. There was something ethereal about the way she moved, as if she saw more than others with her inner eyes. Yet, Babatunde had never dared approach her. How could a man who could not speak or hear connect with a woman who could not see? The thought filled him with doubt, but as fate would have it, it was not Babatunde who initiated their union. His elder brother, a man practical in mind but harsh in spirit, came to him one day with news. The family had decided it was time for Babatunde to marry, and they had found him a suitable bride, Moronike, a blind woman who lived alone at the edge of the village. The arrangement was less about love and more about ridding both families of responsibility. No longer would they have to care for Babatunde, the mute, or Moronike, the blind. Together, they would become each other's burden. Though his brother's words were cold, Babatunde did not resist. He did not feel shame or bitterness, for in his heart there was only a quiet joy. The thought of being bound to Moronike, the woman whose strength and grace had long filled him with silence and admiration, felt like a gift. He would be her eyes, and perhaps she could help him communicate in ways he had never imagined. Moronike, too, had accepted the arrangement with quiet dignity. She had always believed in the goodness of people, and though she had never met Babatunde closely, She had heard stories of his kindness. Despite his silence, people spoke of his actions, his generosity, and his gentle nature. When the marriage was proposed to her, she smiled, that same serene smile she was known for. The wedding was a simple affair, with the village gathered under the shade of an ancient iroko tree. Babatunde's hands had gently guided Moronike through the ceremony, and though they did not exchange words, the bond between them was evident to all who witnessed it. To them, their union was not one of convenience, but of mutual respect and understanding. Over time, they learned to navigate their world together. Babatunde guided Moronike with his strong, gentle hands, and Moronike teaching him how to see the beauty in the world that was beyond sight or sound. As Femi grew, he learned from his parents that love did not need words or sight to flourish. It thrived in the quiet act of kindness, in the unspoken understanding that passed between two people. His mother's laughter, like the tinkling of her beads, filled their home, while his father's steady presence was like the deep roots of a tree, grounding them all. The village, too, came to admire the couple. They were a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the greatest challenges could be overcome with patience and love. And though Femi's family was different from most, it was rich in ways that others could only envy. It had been a quiet evening when Moronike first held a flutter in her belly, like the soft wings of a butterfly. She paused in her walk, her fingers stealing on the string of beads that rested on her lap. For a moment, she sat completely still, feeling the small but unmistakable signs of life within her. A smile spread across her face. She knew she needed to tell Babatunde. Placing her hands in front of her to feel the familiar surroundings, Moronike stood up and made her way to the garden where Babatunde was walking. Her movements were sure, the pathways memorized over the months of walking them without sight. The sound of her footsteps on the soil let Babatunde know she was coming. He came to her immediately, concern etched on his face as he stood before her, taking her hands in his. Without words, she guided his hand to her stomach. Her smile growing wider as she felt his finger tremble. Babatunde understood in that moment they were going to have a child. Joy surged through him, so powerful that it momentarily took his breath away. He had always imagined what it would be like to be a father, to raise a child alongside Moronike. But just as quickly, that joy was shadowed by a silent fear, one that crept into the corners of his heart like an unwelcome guest. What if the child inherited their disabilities? What kind of life would their child have in a world that often viewed people like them with pity or worse, disdain? Moronike sensed the change in Babatunde's mood. As if she could read his thoughts, she squeezed his hand gently, pulling him back from his worries. This child, she whispered, her voice soft but strong, will be loved no matter what. We will teach him all we know, how to live, how to love, how to see the world even when eyes cannot, and how to speak even in silence. She reached up and touched his face, guiding his fingers to her lips once more. Babatunde looked into her eyes and focused on her mouth, waiting for her to speak again. This child, she whispered, speaking slowly so that he could read her lips, will be loved no matter what. We will teach him everything we have learned. Her words, though simple, carried the strength of her conviction. Babatunde nodded slowly, reassured by her calm certainty. She had always been the light of his darkness, her strength, a constant source of comfort. They had faced many challenges together, and now they would face this one too. He placed both hands on her belly, his face breaking into a wide silent smile. Their child would be a gift, not a burden, no matter what. As the weeks passed, and Moronike's belly swelled with life, the news of her pregnancy spread through the village like wildfire. Some were shocked, others were curious. After all, it wasn't every day that a blind woman and a mute man brought a child into the world. Whispers began to fill the air, weaving through the market and the fields. As people speculated about the child's fate, I heard the child might be born blind or deaf. One woman murmured to her neighbor as they pounded yam together. Imagine the burden they will face. Another voice chimed in. What kind of life would that child have? They can hardly communicate themselves. Yet, amidst the mockery and doubt, there were voices of encouragement as well. An old woman, known for her wisdom, shook her head at the gossipers. You underestimate God, she said firmly. Babatunde and Moronike are stronger than you know, and their child, whatever challenges he may face, will be no different. Mark my words, he will grow into someone we will all be proud of. Despite the mixed reactions, the gossip weighed on them. Babatunde could see the way people looked at Moronike in the village, and though he could not hear the comment, he knew from the expressions on their faces that many were doubtful. He worked harder in the fields, pouring his silent frustrations into the soil. Moronike, while unable to see the stairs, could feel the shift in people's voices when they spoke to her, offering unsolicited advice or poorly veiled pity. Yet, through it all, Moronike and Babatunde remained resolute. They spoke to each other without words, their understanding deepened by months of shared life. At night, they sat together by the fire. Moronike, resting her hand on her belly with Babatunde, sat beside her, his head tilted slightly, always reading the expressions on her face. We will love this child, Moronike would say to him slowly, her words forming on her lips, clear enough for him to read. And this child will teach us more than we could ever teach him. The months passed, and soon the time came for Moronike to give birth. On a warm evening, as the sky blazed with the colors of sunset, the time came as Moronike's labor began. Babatunde stayed by her side, watching her face intently, reading her needs without the need for sound. Moronike's labor was long and difficult, pain of childbirth, overwhelming her senses. Babatunde remained close, his eyes never leaving her face. He could not hear her cries, but he could feel the tremors of her body, the tension in her hands as she gripped his. He pressed her hand to his lips, silently reminding her that he was with her, that they were in this together. Moronike, though exhausted, found comfort in his presence. She could not see him, but she felt his strength, steady and unwavering. The midwife, who had been preparing for the birth, communicated with Babatunde through gestures they had worked out ahead of time. Moronike, though blind and in pain, focused on the presence of both Babatunde and the midwife, trusting them completely. The hours passed slowly, with Babatunde never leaving her side. He could not hear her cries, but he saw the tension in her body and the exhaustion on her face. Finally, as the night deepened, the baby was born. The midwife held up the child, a small bundle of life, wriggling in her arms. Babatunde's eyes were fixed on the midwife as he waited for her to turn to him. She smiled softly as she handed the baby to Moronike. The boy is strong, she said, speaking clearly so Babatunde could read her lips. He's healthy. Moronike's shoulders sagged in relief, her hand flying to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Babatunde too let out a long breath, his chest heavy with silent sobs of gratitude. Babatunde placed his hand on the baby's head, his expression one of pure relief and joy. Moronike held the baby close, her fingers tracing the delicate features of his face as tears filled her sightless eyes. Babatunde watched them both, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. They had brought life into the world, and despite the challenges, their child would know nothing but love. Femi grew up under the watchful eyes and caring hands of his parents. From an early age, he understood that his family was different. His mother's blindness and his father's inability to speak or hear were facts of life. Things he quickly learned to navigate as easily as he navigated the path between the village and their home. But what Femi couldn't ignore were the words of others, the whispers, the stares, and the cruel taunts from the village children. At first, Femi was too young to understand the mocking laughter that followed him when he ran through the village. He didn't know why the other children avoided him or why they mimicked the silent gestures his father used to communicate. But as he grew older, the cruelty became more apparent. Look at him, they would jeer, the son of the blind and the mute. He probably can't speak properly either. He's going to be just like them, useless. The words cut deep, sharper than any blade, and Femi would run home, his small hands clenched into fists, tears streaming down his face. At first, he tried to hide the pain from his parents. How could he tell them about the mocking when his father couldn't hear it, and his mother couldn't see the children pointing and laughing? But Femi soon realized he didn't need to say anything. His parents always knew when something was wrong. One evening, after a particular hard day, Femi sat by the fire, refusing to speak. His father, Babatunde, noticed the boy's clenched jaw and downcast eyes. Babatunde knelt in front of his son, his hands gentle as they touched Femi's shoulders. Moronike, sensing the tension, joined them, sitting quietly beside her son. Without words, Babatunde asked the question, "What happened?" Femi, still holding back tears, turned to face his father. He didn't need to say much. Babatunde, reading the sadness in his son's eyes and the tightness in his posture, understood. Moronike, though blind, could sense the heaviness in the air. She placed her hand on Femi's cheek, her voice soft but firm. "Femi, the world will not always be kind," she said, speaking slowly so that Babatunde could read her lips as well. "But what matters most is how we see ourselves. You are strong, you are loved, and no matter what others say, you must never forget that." Babatunde nodded, placing his hand over his heart, and then gently tapping Femi's chest, a gesture that meant, "We are with you always." Their reassurances gave Femi a sense of peace, a sense of belonging that the outside world could not take away. His parents' love was his anchor, and though the village children's town still hurt, they no longer had the power to shake him. As Femi grew, so did his determination. He watched his parents closely, marveling at the way they navigated the world despite their challenges. Babatunde's hands spoke volumes, his gestures as clear as words to those who knew him. Veronica's smile and laughter filled their home with warmth, even though her eyes would not see the light. They were proud of him, and in return, Femi vowed to make them prouder still. He threw himself into his studies, determined to learn everything he could. In school, while the other children played and laughed, Femi focused on his lessons. He wanted to be the best, not just for himself, but for his parents. He knew that as he grew older, they would rely on him more, and though he was still young, Femi had already decided that he would be their voice and their guide in the world. At home, Femi became the bridge between his mother and father. Moronike, though blind, could feel the unspoken connection between Femi and Babatunde, how they communicated through subtle gestures and movements. Femi had inherited his father's skill for reading lips, and he used this ability to translate his mother's words into gestures for Babatunde. It was an unspoken bond, an intuitive dance that became second nature to the boy. When Moronike wanted to tell Babatunde something, she would speak softly, knowing Femi was close by to read her lips. Femi would then turn to his father and use the hand signals Babatunde had taught him over the years. In this way, the family communicated seamlessly, with Femi acting as the thread that tied them all together. One evening, as they sat around the fire, Femi's heart swelled with pride as he watched his parents smile at each other. He had helped them build something beautiful, a home where love and understanding transcended any limitations the world might impose. But Femi's determination extended beyond the walls of their home. He excelled in school, earning the admiration of his teachers and the grudging respect of the village children who once taunted him. Slowly, the whispers of mockery began to fade, replaced by murmurs of admiration. Femi is a hard worker, they would say. He's not like we thought. He's going to be something great. Despite the shift in opinion, Femi remained humble. His motivation was not to prove the village wrong, but to ensure that his parents never had to face the ridicule that had once plagued his childhood. He wanted to stand tall for them, to be the person who could bridge the gap between them and the rest of the world. Over the years, Femi became more than just a son to his parents. He became their eyes and ears, their voice in a world that was often too loud and too distant for them. He spoke for his mother when others didn't have the patience to explain things slowly. He read the lips of the village elders for his father during important meetings. And through it all, Femi felt his parents' pride like a steady flame, warming his heart on the darkest days. One day, as Femi helped his father in the fields, Babatunde stopped for a moment, wiping the sweat from his brow. He turned to Femi and sighed. You are strong. You have become the man I always hoped you would be. Femi smiled, his chest swelling with pride. His father didn't need to say more. The bond they shared was deeper than words, more profound than any conversation could ever be. Later that evening, as the family sat together under the stars, Veronica reached out and placed her hand on Femi's shoulder. Her fingers traced his face, as if seeing him for the first time. You are everything we dreamed you would be, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. You are our greatest gift. Femi didn't reply. He didn't need to. His heart was full, and in that moment, he knew that no matter what challenges the future held, they would face them with the same quiet strength that his parents had taught him. One early morning, as the sun had just begun to peek over the horizon, bathing the village in a golden glow, Femi was sitting with his parents by the fire, helping his mother string beads while Babatunde quietly mended a basket. The sound of footsteps approaching the house broke the stillness, and Femi looked up to see the village messenger carrying a large envelope in his hand. The messenger handed the letter to Femi with a smile and a nod, as if he already knew what the contents held. Femi took the envelope in his trembling hands when he saw the logo on it, his heart pounding. His parents, sensing the significance of the moment, paused in their work. Babatunde moved closer, while Moronike, unable to see what was actually happening, felt the tension in the air. Femi carefully opened the envelope, pulling out the letter inside. His eyes scanned the words, and as he read, his heart skipped a beat. He had been accepted into a prestigious university, one of the finest institutions in the country. And not only that, he had been awarded a scholarship that would cover his tuition, housing, and even his meals. For a moment, Femi was speechless. He had worked so hard for this moment, pouring all his energy into his studies, dreaming of a future that would allow him to help his parents in ways they couldn't imagine. But now that it was here, the reality was overwhelming. Moronike, unable to wait any longer, reached for Femi's hand. What does he say? He asked softly, her voice filled with anticipation. Femi smiled, his voice thick with emotion. I have been accepted. They want me to attend the university, and I have been given a scholarship. Moronike gasped, her face breaking into a wide smile as she put Femi into a tight embrace. Papa Tunde, who had been watching Femi closely, understood what had just happened. He gripped his son's shoulder, his face full of pride, his silent joy filling the space between them. They were proud, prouder than words could express. Their son, who had faced so much adversity, had achieved something they had only dreamed of. He was going to go far, farther than they had ever imagined. But as the initial joy settled, a new fear crept into Femi's heart. The university was far, far beyond the village, in another state, where life was fast paced and unfamiliar. He had never left his village before. The thought of being away from his parents, who relied on him so much, weighed heavily on his mind. That night, as they sat by the fire, Femi shared his fears with his parents. How can I leave you both here alone? He said, his voice quiet. What if something happens and I'm not here to help? What if I don't know how to manage on my own in a place so different from here? Moronike, hearing the worry in her son's voice, reached for him. She took his hand in hers and squeezed it gently. Femi, she began slowly. You have always been strong. You have always found a way to overcome every challenge. This is no different. Just as you have been our strength, you must trust that we'll be okay. We have lived our lives together for many years before you came, and we'll continue to manage. This is your time to fly. Batunde nodded in agreement, his hand resting on Femi's shoulder. He gestured with his free hand, signing to his son, you must go. We'll be fine. You have earned this opportunity. Don't let fear hold you back. Femi felt a lump in his throat. His parents' encouragement meant everything to him, but the idea of leaving them behind still frightened him. Yet, deep down, he knew they were right. This was a chance he couldn't let slip away. The weeks leading up to Femi's departure were filled with preparations. The villagers, many of whom had watched Femi grow up, came to congratulate him and offer their well wishes. Some brought gifts, simple tokens like food or handmade items, while others offered advice about the world beyond the village. Femi smiled and thanked them, but inside, the nerves grew stronger with each passing day. Finally, the day arrived. Femi stood at the edge of the village, his small bag packed with all the essentials for his journey. His parents stood beside him, their faces full of pride. Moronike, who could not see her son's departing figure, held his hands tightly, her smile bittersweet. Babatunde's grip on his son's shoulder was firm, a silent message that Femi would carry with him wherever he went. You will be great, Moronike said, her voice soft. We know it. Femi nodded, trying to hold back his tears. He hugged his parents tightly, promising to write to them as often as he could before turning to begin his journey. When Femi arrived at the university, it felt like stepping into another world. The campus was massive, with towering buildings vast lawns, and a buzz of activity that overwhelmed his senses. The pace of life here was so different from the quiet village he had left behind. Students rushed past him, speaking in languages he didn't fully understand, dressed in clothes that seemed foreign to him. At first, Femi felt lost. The sophistication of the campus, the unfamiliarity of the people, and the sheer scale of everything left him disoriented. He was no longer the confident young man who had grown up navigating the village with ease. Here, he felt like a small fish in an enormous ocean. There were times, especially in those early days, when Femi would sit alone in his dorm room, thinking of home. He missed the quiet rhythms of village life, the warmth of his parents' presence, the comfort of their small house. He missed the way his father would place his hands on his shoulders to communicate, or how his mother's smile could brighten even the darkest days. But despite the homesickness, Femi was determined. He threw himself into his studies, determined to excel, just as he had back in the village. He knew that his success here wasn't just for him, it was for his parents too. He had to make them proud. As the weeks passed, Femi began to find his footing. He made friends with some of the other students, many of whom were curious about his life back home. His professors noticed his hard work and dedication, often praising him for his efforts. Slowly, the overwhelming sensation of being lost in a foreign world began to fade, replaced by a growing confidence. But it wasn't easy. There were still moments when Femi struggled to keep up, especially with the fast paced discussions in class or the unfamiliar technology used in the university. He had to work twice as hard to understand concepts that seemed second nature to the other students. Yet, every time he felt discouraged, he thought of his parents, their love, their pride, and the sacrifices they had made to give him this opportunity. And so, Femi pushed on. He studied late into the night, sometimes exchanging letters with his parents to share his progress. Each letter he received from home filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. His father's carefully written note, simple but heartfelt, reminded him of the strength and resilience that ran through his veins. His mother's words, filled with warmth and encouragement, gave him the courage to keep going. In time, Femi began to thrive at the university. His hard work paid off, and he started to stand out among his peers. But no matter how far he went, he never forgot where he came from. His parents, the village, and the lessons he had learned growing up were always with him, guiding him as he navigated this new world. But as it is with most things in life, Femi quickly noticed how different he was from his peers. The campus was filled with students from well off families, dressed in the latest fashions, talking about their summer holidays abroad and the luxuries they had grown up with. Many of them had parents who were doctors, lawyers, or business owners. They seemed to belong to a world Femi had only seen from afar. Back in the village, Femi had never thought much about his parents' disabilities. Everyone knew his family, and though they were different, they were respected. He had grown up surrounded by people who understood their unique way of life. But now, in this new environment, with students who had able-bodied wealthy parents, Femi began to see his background through a new painful lens. He started to feel ashamed. How could he explain to his friends that his father couldn't speak or hear, that his mother was blind? It wasn't something he was proud of anymore. It became something he hid. While his friends boasted about their parents' achievements, Femi remained silent, nodding along, but never offering stories about his own family. The thought of their reactions if they found out about his parents made his stomach churn with dread. So he kept his silence. When his friends asked about his family, he spoke in vague terms, never mentioning the truth. He pretended his life back home was ordinary, like theirs. But as the weeks passed, the weight of the secret he was carrying began to grow heavier. Then one day, Femi received a letter from his parent. It was written by his father. The letters uneven but full of love. Babatunde and Moronike were planning to visit him. They missed him terribly and wanted to bring him some of his mother's home cooked meals, knowing how much he must miss them. At first, Femi felt a surge of joy at the thought of seeing his parents. It had been months since he left the village, and he missed them deeply. But almost immediately, his heart sank. What if his friends saw them? His father, unable to speak, using hand signals to communicate. His mother, with her sightless eyes, feeling her way through the unfamiliar campus. The thought of his friends' judgment, their pity, was too much to bear. For days, Femi wrestled with himself. He wanted to see his parents, to hold them and tell them about everything that had happened at university. But the fear of what others might think began to eat away at him. He wished they hadn't decided to visit, wished they had stayed in the village where no one would see them. The shame he felt was like a stone lodged in his chest, growing heavier with every passing day. When the day of their visit arrived, Femi's anxiety reached its peak. His parents had traveled far, a journey that was especially difficult for them because of their disabilities. Moronike had packed his favorite meal, spicy jollof rice, grilled chicken and fried plantains, carefully wrapped in a basket. When they reached the campus, Femi's heart leaped when he saw them. But the sight of them, his mother, feeling her way with her hands, his father, quietly watching her every movement, filled him with a strange mix of love and dread. His mother's face lit up when she heard his footsteps. Femi, we have missed you, she said, her voice warm and full of love. And she reached out to touch his face, her usual way of knowing he was there. Babatunde smiled broadly, patting Femi's shoulder in their familiar gesture of affection. But Femi's stomach clenched as he saw a group of his friends walking by in the distance. Panic surged in him. His friend would see them. They would see his father, who couldn't speak, and his mother, who couldn't see. His fear of judgment overwhelmed him. Why did you come here? He muttered under his breath, stepping back slightly, avoiding his mother's touch. I told you I'm busy. I have a lot of work to do. Moronike's smile faltered slightly. We just wanted to surprise you, my son. We brought your favorite meal. Femi's eyes darted towards his friends, who were now laughing and glancing at his way. His panic deepened. He couldn't bear to think what they were saying. His voice tightened. I don't have time for this right now. You shouldn't have come. But in the sensing something was wrong, placed a comforting hand on Femi's arm, his face full of concern. Moronike too seemed to feel the distance between them, her hand hovering in the air, unsure of how to reach him. Femi, consumed by the fear of embarrassment, took a step back. I have to go, he said abruptly, his voice harsher than he intended. Take the food and go home. I don't have time for this. And with that, he turned away, walking quickly towards his dorm without looking back. He didn't see the confusion in his father's eyes, or the hurt that flickered across his mother's face. He just wanted to get away, to escape the shame that was burning inside him. That evening, Femi sat alone in his dorm room, his heart heavy with regret. He had pushed away his parents, the two people who had given him everything, all because of his fear of what his friends might think. The image of his mother's outstretched hand haunted him, and he couldn't shake the feeling of his father's gentle touch, a touch he had recoiled from. His roommate, Dakbo, walked in and immediately noticed the tension in the air. He sat down on the edge of his bed, observing Femi quietly. After a few moments, he spoke. I saw what happened today, Dakbo said softly. Those were your parents, weren't they? Femi didn't answer right away. He just nodded, his eyes downcast. That was sighed, leaning back. You didn't want them here, did you? You were ashamed. Femi flinched at the word, but he didn't deny it. The truth was too heavy to ignore. I didn't want my friends to see them, he admitted quietly. My father, he can't talk, and my mother, she's blind. I didn't want them to know. I didn't want them to laugh at me. Backward watched him for a long moment before speaking again. I get it, he said. More than you know. Femi looked up surprised. Backward had always seemed so self assured, so confident. He couldn't imagine him struggling with something like this. When I was younger, Backward began, his voice calm but tinged with emotion. I felt the same way. My dad was an alcoholic. Every time he drank, he would embarrass us. He would show up at school events drunk, stumbling around, slurring his words, making a fool of himself. I was so ashamed of him. I didn't want anyone to know. I avoided him, pretended I didn't have a father, and it worked for a while. No one knew. No one laughed at me, but it ate me up inside. Femi listened. The weight of that was sinking in. Then one day, my father got really sick. The alcohol had done too much damage to his liver. I didn't have much time left with him. When I went to visit him in the hospital, he apologized. He told me he was sorry for all the days he had embarrassed me, for not being the father I deserved. But then, he said something that I will never forget. He said, I know you were ashamed of me. I know I wasn't what you wanted me to be, but I always loved you. That's what mattered most to me. Backward paused, his eyes distant as he remembered his father's words. He died not long after. Backward continued, his voice tight, and I realized too late that I had spent so much time being ashamed of him, trying to hide from my past, that I missed the chance to really appreciate him while he was still alive. Femi felt a lump forming in his throat. Backward's story mirrored his own fears, his own shame. He realized now that his parents' disabilities weren't something to be ashamed of. They were a part of who they were, a part of what made them strong. Dakpo leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. Your parents love you, Femi. They came all the way to see you, to bring you food because they know you miss it. And you pushed them away because you were worried about what few people might think. Trust me, it's not worth it. Don't make the same mistake I did. Femi didn't need to hear anymore. Without another word, he jumped off from his bed and ran out of the dorm. His heart pounded as he raced across the campus, panic rising in his chest. His parents had come all this way, and he had treated them like they were an embarrassment. He needed to find them, to apologize, to tell them how much he loved them. He sprinted to the entrance of the campus, where they had been earlier. His breath came in raged gasps as he scanned the area, his eyes searching for any sign of them. They didn't know the campus well, and he feared they had already left. Femi's heart pounded as he ran, scanning the campus entrance frantically. His breath was raged, and his mind raced with guilt and desperation. He couldn't believe what he had done. He had pushed away the two people who loved him most, all because of his own insecurity. He feared he had waited too long. They were probably already gone. He dashed past the entrance, his eyes darting from one side of the street to the other, searching for any sign of them. His mind replayed the moment earlier when he had turned his back on them. The look of confusion on his father's face, the pain in his mother's voice. How could he have let his fear of judgment overpower his love for them? As he ran, he spotted a small figure near the road. It was his mother, Moronike, holding onto his father's arm as they slowly made their way towards the bus stop at the edge of the street. Babatunde was guiding her carefully, and the basket of food they had brought was still stuck under his other arm. Femi felt his chest tighten with emotion. He bolted towards them, his feet pounding against the pavement. Mama, Papa, he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. Wait! Veronica's head lifted slightly at the sound of his voice, her unseeing eyes searching the air. Babatunde turned, his expression confused as he saw Femi running towards them, tears streaming down his face. Femi reached them, breathless and shaking. He stopped just in front of them, struggling to catch his breath as he fought to find his words. His chest felt heavy with the weight of all that he had done, but the words couldn't come out. He looked into his mother's blind eyes, her face still radiant with the love she always showed him, and his father's silent but steady presence beside her, and the flood of emotions nearly overwhelmed him. I'm sorry, Femi choked out, his voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I I didn't mean what I said earlier. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was afraid, afraid of what people would think. But it was wrong. I was wrong. Moronike, sensing the raw pain in her son's voice, reached out with her hand, finding his face. Her fingers gently brushed his cheek, feeling the wetness of his tears. Oh, Femi, she whispered softly. My son, don't cry. There is nothing to be sorry for. We know how hard it is for you here. But Femi shook his head, overwhelmed with guilt. No, Mama, I hurt you. I let my fear and shame control me, and I pushed you away. I was scared of what my friends would think of me because because you are different. But I was wrong to feel that way. I'm not ashamed of you. I'm proud of you both. You have taught me more about strength and love than anyone else in this world. Babatunde, though unable to hear his son's words, could feel the intensity of the moment through Femi's trembling hands and the tears in his eyes. He placed his hand gently on Femi's head, a gesture of forgiveness and reassurance, his face softening into a kind smile. Moronica's lips curled into a smile as he put Femi into a tight embrace. We love you, Femi, no matter what. Femi wrapped his arms around his mother and father, holding them both close. In that moment, the weight of his shame lifted. He didn't care who saw them or what anyone thought. His parents were his world, and their love was worth more than the approval of anyone else. I love you too, Femi whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I'm sorry I forgot that for a moment. They stood there for a long time, the three of them holding each other in the soft light of the setting sun. Femi's heart swelled with gratitude for the chance to make things right. He vowed never to let his shame or fear come between them. When they finally pulled apart, Femi insisted they return to the campus with him. Please come back, he said, his voice earnest. Let me make it up to you. I want to eat that meal with you just like we used to. Moronike's face lit up with joy, and Babatunde nodded, his silent approval clear. They turned around and made their way back towards the campus together, Femi walking between them, his head held high. This time, he didn't care who saw them. He was proud to be the son of Moronike and Babatunde. Back in his dorm room, Femi introduced his parents to Dapo and set out the food his mother had brought, filling the small room with comforting smell of home. They sat together on the floor, just like they used to in the village, sharing stories and laughter as they ate. Except that this time Dapo was in the mix, enjoying every morsel and story. Batunde smiled as he watched his son, his roommate and his wife occasionally gesturing in their silent language to share a thought or memory. For the first time in a long time, Femi felt at peace. The campus, the sophisticated environment, the pressure to fit in, it all faded away in the warmth of his parents' presence. They didn't need words to express their love, and Femi no longer needed to hide who he was. As the evening wore on, Femi realized how much he had missed this, the simplicity, the connection, the feeling of being truly known and loved for who he was. He had been so consumed by the need to belong in this new world that he had forgotten where he truly belonged. That night, after his parents had gone back home, Femi sat by the window in his dorm, staring out at the quiet campus. He thought about everything Dapo had said, about the lesson he had learned today. He had nearly let shame rob him of the most important people in his life. But now he understood his parents' love, their sacrifices, their strength. These were not things to hide. They were his foundation, the reason he had come this far. And so, from that day forward, Femi vowed never to hide who he was again. He carried his parents with him in everything he did, proud of the strength they had passed on to him. When his friends asked about his family, he spoke openly, telling them about his father's quiet strength and his mother's radiant love. And if anyone pitied him or looked down on him, Femi no longer cared. He had learned a powerful lesson that true belonging came not from hiding who you are, but from embracing it fully. And as he sat there, the memory of his parents' visit still fresh in his mind, Femi smiled. He knew that wherever life took him, he would always carry their love with him, like a flame that would never go out. Years passed, and Femi's time at university came to a triumphant end. Despite the rocky start, he had grown into a confident young man who was no longer afraid of his past or his roots. He excelled in his studies, particularly in the world of technology, where his hard work and innovative thinking earned him the admiration of professors and students alike. On the day of his graduation, Femi stood tall in his cap and gown, surrounded by his peers. The prestigious university had opened doors for him that he had only dreamed of back in the village. His hard work had paid off, and he was now ready to take on the world with knowledge and skills he had gained. But as proud as he was of himself, nothing meant more to him than the two people sitting quietly in the audience, his parents, Babatunde and Moronike. His mother sat with her hands folded in her lap, her face glowing with pride, even though she couldn't see the grandeur of the ceremony. His father, as always, sat with a calm and quiet dignity, watching the crowd around them, his sharp eyes taking everything in. They had traveled far once again, but this time, Femi didn't care who saw them or what anyone thought. He only cared that they were there to witness this moment. As Femi's name was called, the applause thundered through the auditorium. He walked across the stage to receive his degree, feeling the weight of his achievement settle into his hands. As he stood there, holding the certificate that symbolizes years of sacrifice and perseverance, he looked out into the audience and found his parents. A lump formed in his throat as he saw them sitting there, knowing everything they had gone through to give him such opportunity. This moment wasn't just his, it was theirs too. Femi's career took off quickly after graduation. With his deep understanding of technology and his relentless drive, he found a position at a top technology firm where he thrived. His creativity and innovative solutions earned him rapid promotions, and soon he was at the forefront of developing cutting edge technology that was changing the world. Every project he worked on, every problem he solved, was another step towards the success he had always dreamed of. But no matter how far he went in his career, Femi never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the night sittings by the fire with his parents, the quiet lessons of resilience and love they had taught him. He saved his money carefully, building a future not just for himself, but for them as well. His success wasn't just his to enjoy, it was something he wanted to share with the people who had given him everything. And so one day, after years of hard work and dedication, Femi was able to do something he had always dreamed of. He had saved enough money to fly his parents to one of the best hospitals in the country, a place known for its world-class doctors and specialists. He wanted to see if there was any possibility that their disabilities, his mother's blindness and his father's deafness, could be treated or managed. The day of the hospital visit was filled with anticipation and hope. Femi his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Accompanying his parents to the hospital, it was an overwhelming experience for all of them. For so long, they had accepted their conditions as part of their lives, never imagining that anything could change. But Femi had always held onto a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, with the advances in modern medicine and technology, there was a way to give them back something they had lost. The doctors conducted a series of tests, each one more advanced than the last. Femi watched anxiously as his parents were examined, praying that the result would offer them something, anything that could improve their lives. He knew that no matter the outcome, they would still be the strong, resilient people that had always been. But if there was even a small chance that something could be done, he wanted to give them that chance. After hours of waiting, the doctors finally gathered with Femi and his parents to discuss the result. For Moronike, the news was life-changing. The doctors explained that her blindness, while severe, could potentially be reversed with a cornea transplant. It was a complex procedure, and there were no guarantees. But the possibility of her regaining her sight after so many years was something Femi could hardly believe. There is a chance? Femi asked, his voice thick with emotion. The doctor nodded. Yes, with a successful cornea transplant and proper rehabilitation, your mother may regain her sight. The process will take time, months, in fact, between the surgery and the recovery period, but it's possible. Moronike sat in silence for a moment, her hands resting in her lap. The idea of seeing again, of being able to witness the world around her after so many years in darkness, was overwhelming. She had learned to live without sight, to navigate the world with her heart and her other senses. But now, this new possibility stirred something deep within her. She reached out for Femi's hand. If this is possible, my son, if I can see your face, then let's do it. Femi smiled, tears filling his eyes as he held his mother's hand tightly. We will do it, Mama. We'll do whatever it takes. The months that followed were filled with hope and patience. Moronike underwent the cornea transplant and the surgery was successful. But the doctors were careful to manage expectations. Her sight would return gradually, and it would take time for her eyes to adjust to seeing again. The road ahead was long, but Femi and his parents were ready for the journey. Every week, Femi accompanied his mother to her checkups, watching closely as the doctors monitored her progress. Slowly, day by day, Moronike's world began to shift from darkness to light. At first, it was just shadows and blurs, but gradually, the shapes around her became clearer. One day, months after the surgery, as they sat in the hospital room during a routine checkup, Moronike's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in decades, she saw her son's face. It wasn't perfect, her vision was still adjusting, but he could see him. The tears that welled up in her eyes were not of sadness, but overwhelming joy. Femi, she whispered, her voice trembling, I can see you. Femi, unable to speak, knelt beside his mother's chair, his own tears streaming down his face. He smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude for this moment, for this miracle that had never thought possible. Babatunde, who had always communicated with his wife through touch and sound, watched silently, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Though he had accepted long ago that their lives would be different, he too was moved by this moment of unexpected grace. For Babatunde, the news was equally hopeful. The doctors explained that while his deafness was profound, advances in cochlear implant could potentially give him partial hearing. It wouldn't be perfect, but it could allow him to hear certain sounds, voices, music, the laughter of his son. When Femi heard this, he looked at his father, his heart pounding. Babatunde, though quiet, had always communicated through touch and gestures, never needing sound to express his love. But now, the idea that he might hear his son's voice, even just a little, filled the room with emotion. Babatunde smiled softly, reaching for his son's hand. He sighed. I have never needed to hear to know love. But if this is possible, I will try it. Femi's heart swelled with pride and hope. The next step would involve surgery and rehabilitation, a long process that would take patience and determination. But Babatunde was willing to try. Months passed, and after a successful surgery, Batunde began the process of learning to hear through the implant. The first time he had even the faintest sound, it was overwhelming. The doctors had prepared him for the fact that it wouldn't be like normal hearing, but even the muted, distorted sounds were a revelation. The day Babatunde heard Femi's voice for the first time, truly heard it, was a day none of them would ever forget. It wasn't clear or loud, but it was there, like a whisper of the wind. Babatunde's eyes filled with tears, and Femi, unable to hold back his emotion, embraced his father tightly. I love you, Papa, Femi whispered, knowing the words reached him in a way they never had before. Babatunde didn't need to respond with words. The smile on his face, the warmth in his eyes said everything. For Moronike and Babatunde, life after the hospital visit wasn't dramatically different, but it was filled with a renewed sense of possibility. Moronike now had her sight restored, and though it wasn't perfect, it was more than she had ever hoped for. She could see her son's face, the beauty of the world around her, and the home they had built together. Babatunde, though still largely silent, had glimpses of sound in his life for the first time. Femi's heart was full. He had achieved success in the world, but more importantly, he had given back to the two people who had shaped him into the man he had become. His journey had been long, filled with struggles and moments of shame, but he had triumphed over it all. As they sat together one evening back in the village where it all began, Femi looked at his parents and smiled. Moronike, now able to see the soft flicker of the firelight, marveled at the colors of the evening sky, something she hadn't seen in decades. She turned her eyes towards her son, drinking in the sight of him, the man he had become, the boy who had once run through the village with dreams in his heart. She still couldn't believe that she was seeing him now, his face a blend of her own futures and his father's strength. I never imagined I would see you like this, Femi, she said quietly, her voice filled with joy. I feel like I'm dreaming. Femi smiled, his thoughts swelling with emotion. It's no dream, Mama. You deserve it. You both do. Babatunde, sitting beside them, placed his hand on Femi's shoulder, his familiar silent gesture of affection, though he still relied mostly on their old ways of communication. He occasionally caught the sound of Femi's voice or the rustling of the leaves through his cochlear implant. It was a strange new world for him, and he was still learning to navigate, but he embraced it as he had embraced every challenge in his life with quiet determination. As they sat together there, surrounded by the peaceful rhythms of the village, Femi reflected on everything they had been through. His parents had taught him the true meaning of strength, of love, of resilience. They had faced the world with their disabilities, not as limitations, but as challenges to be met with dignity and grace. And now, after all these years of sacrifice, he had been able to give something back to them, a chance at a fuller life. Moronike's sight continued to improve over the following month, and every day brought new discoveries. She marveled at the faces of the people who she had only known through touch and sound, at the vibrant colors of the world she had long since forgotten. The first time she saw her own reflection in a mirror, she smiled softly, running her fingers over the lines that had formed over the years. I don't mind the wrinkles, she said with a laugh. They tell the story of a life well lived. For Babatunde, the journey was more subtle. His hearing, though not perfect, allowed him to experience moments he had never known before. His wife's voice, Femi's laughter, the sound of the wind on the trees. It was a new chapter for him, and while it was something overwhelming, he embraced it with the same quiet strength he always had. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset over the village, Veronica turned to Femi, her heart full of gratitude. You have given us so much, Femi, she said, her voice steady, more than we ever dreamed of. But what makes us proudest is not what you have achieved out there in the world, but the man you have become. You have never forgotten where you came from. Babatunde nodded in agreement, his hand resting gently on his son's shoulder. He sighed, you are our greatest achievement. Femi felt a lump rise in his throat. He had always been driven to succeed, not just for himself, but for them, for the people who had given him everything. And now, as he looked at his parents, their love and pride surrounding him like a warm embrace, he realized that this was the true measure of his success. I am who I am because of you, Femi said quietly, his voice full of emotion. Everything I've done, everything I've become, is because of the love you gave me. They sat there together, the three of them, as the sky darkened and the stars began to appear one by one. It was a simple moment, but one filled with the kind of peace and contentment that only comes after a long journey. Femi knew that life would continue to present challenges. There would always be obstacles to overcome, moments of doubt and difficulty. But with his parents by his side and the lessons they had taught him in his heart, he was ready for whatever the future held. And as the stars shone brightly overhead, Femi felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey, for his family, for the love that had guided him every step of the way. Femi's success in the world of technology continued to grow with each passing year. His reputation as an innovator, a problem solver, and a leader has spread far beyond the borders of the country. But despite his rising fame and fortune, Femi remained humble and grounded. The lessons of his childhood, resilience, humility, and importance of family had never left him. One day, after a particular successful year in his career, Femi decided it was time to fulfill another dream, one he had been quietly working towards for years. He had saved enough money to build something special for his parents, something that will reflect his gratitude for all they had done for him. Back in the village, where his roots were deep and his heart still resided, Femi oversaw the construction of a grand house for his parents. It wasn't just any house. This was a beautiful, spacious home with modern amenities and custom features designed specifically for their needs. Wide hallways for his father, bright open spaces that his mother could now enjoy with her restored sight, and plenty of rooms for family and friends to visit. When the house was completed, Femi arranged for a driver and a brand new car, ensuring that his parents could travel comfortably to visit friends or go to the market whenever they pleased. He hired a team of caretakers to help them with the household chores, along with workers to assist on the farm. Babatunde had always been a hard-working farmer, and though he still loved to work the land, Femi knew it was time for him to rest and enjoy the fruits of his labor. The day Femi presented the new house to his parents was filled with emotion. Veronica stood in front of the grand home, her eyes shining as she took in the sight of the place her son had built for them. She couldn't believe it was real. The spacious rooms, the lush garden, the elegance of the design. Babatunde, though always a man of few words, couldn't hide the pride in his expression as he walked through the house, running his hands along the smooth walls and looking out over the land that had been their home for so many years. My son, Veronica whispered, tears filling her eyes as she turned to Femi. This, this is more than we could have ever imagined. Femi smiled, pulling both of his parents into a tight embrace. You have given me everything, and now it's my turn to give you back. This is your home, Mama, Papa, a place where you can rest and enjoy life. Babatunde placed his hand on Femi's chest, signing, you have made us proud, beyond words. But Femi didn't stop there. He knew that the village, the place that had shaped him and his family, deserved just as much. With his newfound success, Femi began to finance several reputable projects in the village, including the construction of a new school and a medical center. He wanted the children growing up in the village to have access to the best education, and he wanted the villagers to have proper health care, something that had been lacking for so long. This project wasn't just acts of charity, they were his way of giving back to the community that had helped raise him. The village elders praised him for his generosity, and the villagers looked up to him as a role model for the younger generation. Femi's investment in the village transformed it into a place of opportunity, and he watched with pride as new businesses flourished and the village began to thrive. Amidst all these achievements, Femi's personal life was also blossoming. During his travels and work, he had met a beautiful young woman named Amina, whose kindness and intelligence captivated him from the start. Amina was not only beautiful, but also a woman with a heart for others, much like Femi. She worked in education and was passionate about empowering young girls to pursue their dreams. Their shared values and love for their families drew them closer together. In time, Femi asked Amina to marry him, and she happily accepted. Their wedding was a celebration like no other, held in the village surrounded by friends, family, and the entire community that had watched Femi grow from a boy into the successful man he had become. Moronike, her sight restored, wept with joy as she watched her son marry the woman of his dreams. Babatunde, standing tall beside his wife, could hear the sounds of celebration faintly through his implant, and his heart was full. The marriage of Femi and Amina was not just the union of two people, but the blending of their dreams, their passions, and their commitment to making the world a better place. Together, they continue to give back to the village and the world around them, building a legacy of love and generosity that would live on for generations. Years later, as Femi sat in the grand house he had built for his parents, surrounded by his family, he reflected on the incredible journey they had all taken. From the quiet village where it all began, to the challenges of university, to the heights of success, he had never forgotten who he was or where he came from. His parents, Moronike and Babatunde, had taught him the most important lessons of all: that love transcends any disability, that strength comes from within, and that true success is measured not by wealth, but by the difference you make in the lives of those you love. And as Femi looked out at the horizon, with his wife Amina by his side and his parents enjoying the peace and comfort of their new life, he knew that he had fulfilled his greatest dream: to honor the people who had given him everything. Thank you so much for watching this amazing story about Femi and his parents on African Stories. If you liked it and felt inspired with their journey, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by V, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.